Today I would like to talk to you about 4 paradoxes about us that science cannot explain. In the year 2009, which was the Darwin year, there was a media initiative by a group of young Earth creationists in the Netherlands who sent out flyers. And these flyers said to people, you have to choose God rather than evolution. There was another media initiative by a group of students which was titled Back to Your Maker. They encouraged people to take the flyers and send them back to the people who had made them. This, of course, was a clear case of conflict between science and religion. At the time, I also did my little media initiative, which was called Stop the Conflict, in Dutch, Stop de Strijd. With this initiative, I wanted to make clear that science and religion don't have to conflict, necessarily. But unfortunately, the media didn't much pick up on it. I think personally because the media like a bit of conflict. Still, this whole thing got me thinking. Why is the debate between science and religion so fierce? Why are people so against one another? And I thought, well, there's only one discipline that can give me the answer to that question. That has to be the discipline that thinks about the relationship between different fields of knowledge. And this discipline, I think, can only be philosophy. Now, recently I read this book, a philosophical book, Antropología para Inconformes. Anthropology, you could translate it for the restless. People who are not at ease with the standard accounts of what it is to be human. Based on the thinking in this book, I came up with 4 paradoxes, which characterize us human beings. These paradoxes all have the following form. They start from the idea that we have, as human beings, we have desires. Now, these desires only make sense if they refer to a real object. For example, if we are hungry. If we are hungry, there's a real object that the desire refers to, which is food. The desire makes sense because if we're hungry, we want to eat food. Food is real, and we eat the food and our desire is satisfied. So it's a perfectly sensible desire. However, if food wouldn't exist, if there wouldn't be such a thing as food, then it wouldn't make sense to be hungry. Now, the paradoxes I'm going to talk about are about desires which do not seem to be fulfilled, and which cannot be fulfilled. So they don't seem to make sense, which is paradoxical. The first paradox I want to talk about is the paradox of loneliness. Since I'm a biologist, I want to reflect a little bit with you about the natural world first. In the natural world, there are some species, like this hummingbird here, that are very specialized. This hummingbird has a beak that is shaped in such a way that it can get to the bottom of this flower to get the nectar. However, there's also other animals, like this duck and this blackbird, which are way more generalist. You can find them everywhere, and they eat in different ways. Now, human beings are really everywhere. You can find them on the poles, you can find them in the tropics, but using technology, you can even find them in the deep seas, and even stronger, on the moon, sometimes. So human beings are extremely generalist. They are open to many different environments. Still, human beings are not only open to different environments, they are also open to other human beings. As you can see in this diverse group of friends, people from very different backgrounds can be open to each other and share their intimacy. The point is that to this intimacy that we can share, there's also a downside. The desire for intimacy, if it's not fulfilled, leads us to be lonely. Now you may think, okay, this can happen to someone who's sitting alone in his room all day. He starts feeling lonely. Well, that's not only the case. I know of a student pastor who told me that there are people that he talks to that feel lonely, which are people like the president of a student association. So someone who is all the time surrounded by people, has a lot of friends, a lot of connections, but still he feels lonely. We can also think about people that have a family, that have an intimate love relationship, and have children, but still at times they feel lonely. How can this be? It seems that our desire for intimacy is so great that it cannot be fulfilled just by human relationships. This is the first paradox, the paradox of loneliness. The second paradox is the paradox of choice. Now, if we talk about the paradox of choice, usually what we mean by that is that if people are given more options, then you would expect them to be more satisfied with the choice they make. However, it is found that, paradoxically, the more choices people are given, the less satisfied they seem with the choice they make. So if you only have 2 options, you're pretty sure that you chose the right one. But if you have 200 options, then you have chosen one, but you always have the feeling that there might be a better one out there. So you're less satisfied. However, I've recently experienced this when I was looking for a tablet. I was thinking about buying one, but then you come into the market and you see that there's so many tablets out there. I just got so discouraged with all the different options that there were. I didn't have the time to look into all of them, so I just said, okay, leave it, I'm not going to buy one. Still, the paradox of choice, with this paradox of choice, I want to go one step deeper. If you think about human freedom, well, if you search on the internet for images of human freedom, you get something like this. It's an image which shows total openness, being able to receive influences and being able to receive everything. So being open towards new things. However, we know that if we use our freedom, we need to choose things. And if you look for images of choice, then you get something like this. Choice, exit now. Again, this is paradoxical because whenever we choose, we have to limit ourselves to one option. It means that we exclude another option. So choice is always limited, which therefore, in some sense, restricts our freedom, our total openness. Still, we can only use our freedom in this way. So again, our desire for complete freedom is paradoxical. We have this desire, but we know that whenever we want to use it, we cannot fulfill it. We cannot have a full freedom all the time because we need to choose and we need to limit ourselves. This is the second paradox, the paradox of choice. The third paradox is the paradox of boredom. In the Netherlands, we have a feast called the Feast of St. Nicholas. On the 5th of December, St. Nicholas celebrates his birthday and he comes to the Netherlands. Well, he comes a little bit before that. And children get presents on that day. My mother, who's a primary school teacher, tells me that the children, weeks before St. Nicholas comes, they are completely excited about what's going to happen. And, of course, about the presents they're going to get. They're very excited about the presents. Now what you see is that once they have the presents, after the feast, of course they have a good time during the feast, but afterwards the presents are unpacked. Well, they play with it for a little while, but after quite soon they lose their interest in the toys. So you see that the initial excitement is much greater than the enjoyment of the toys themselves. Well, you may say that that only happens to children, but does it? Human beings, adults, also have their toys. So they have their new phones, their new laptop, their new car. And even that special person that you maybe fall in love with. On the first instance, maybe the outside appearance. And that's very promising, something you want to get to know more about. But then once you have the thing, very often the thing that you thought you loved so much wasn't as exciting as you first thought it would be. And after a short while, well, you lose your interest. So this is the third paradox. We seem to have this desire to get to know things we love, but it's so great that whenever we actually get to know something we love, then then it doesn't fulfill us. So even a human person, well, we hope that the relationship after a while turns into something else, so maybe more a loving relationship. But it's not that our desire for being known is completely satisfied all the time. It's still, our desire is much greater than that what is being satisfied. And that again is paradoxical. Then the last paradox is the paradox of integrity. In the Netherlands, we have had some issues with integrity, especially in the scientific community. There have been scientists who have have produced results, scientific results, that weren't real. So there was fraud in these scientific results. So integrity often refers to not upright conduct. However, I think you can talk about more levels of integrity. One level you can talk about is personal integrity. Personal integrity means that we feel that we're being loved and that we're able to love other people. If we are able to do so, we feel that we are fulfilled, that we are integrally fulfilled. And so we are complete human beings. That's something we would often like to do, so be complete human beings. Still in practice we see that it doesn't always work like that. We don't love other people the way we would like to do them, and other people don't love us the way we would like them to love us. So you have things like personal conflicts, people shouting at each other, people arguing. These things we all encounter all the time, and it's not something that makes us happy. We would desire it to be otherwise, but in practice it just doesn't work that way. So again, we have a paradoxical desire for personal integrity, which we cannot seem to live out in practice. Okay, I've now sketched 4 paradoxes for you, and I would like to do a small exercise with you to make you think about the paradoxes. This is what I call the quiet time test. We're going to do a very short version of it here, but I would invite you to do it another time more quietly to think about the 4 paradoxes. So I'm now going to show you the 4 paradoxes and questions you can think about for yourself quietly. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about one now, but if you would like to take some time another time to reflect about the other ones, I think that would be very useful. So let us see which are the things we can think about with these paradoxes. So, for now, pick one that appeals most. Loneliness. Is your desire for intimate relationships fully fulfilled? Choice. Are you as free as you would like to be? Boredom. Are you getting to know things and other people as deeply as you would like? And integrity. Are you reaching integral fulfillment as much as you would like? So let's just take a few seconds and think about one of these issues. Alright, I understand that this is not a lot of time, and it's something that you can go back to and sit about and think about. But I'm sure that all of you recognize some aspects of this in themselves. And maybe if you take a bit more time, you'll recognize more. So the 4 paradoxes are of loneliness, choice, boredom, and integrity. The first question that we come up against is the question: can we resolve these paradoxes using the natural sciences? Science. And I think the answer is a straightforward no. We cannot answer these paradoxes with science. Why? Well, natural science is always about experimenting. Experimenting means measuring something, and measuring something repeatedly. So in order to be able to do an experiment, you have to be able to measure something, or at least model it, think about how you can measure it, all these kinds of things. Now, the desires that we're talking about here are all infinite desires. Infinite desires are unlimited. So what is unlimited cannot be measured by definition. Well, you may say, maybe there are hormones in us that cause these desires, or some neural impulses that cause these desires. These we could measure. Right, that might be the case. We could measure these impulses or these hormones. But what we cannot measure is the object of the desire. Because the object of the desire is unlimited. And you cannot by definition measure the unlimited. Therefore, these desires are not tractable by science in the way that, for instance, hunger is tractable because you can't measure food. The next question is, if we cannot have these desires, if these desires are not scientifically tractable, do we make sense? Do these desires make sense? But before we answer that question, we have to answer the question, would it be possible for these desires, and thus for us, to make sense? Under what conditions could they make sense? So let's look into that now. These questions come to us with special force when we see innocent people suffering. Then we think, really, why does this happen? Does this make sense? Not so long ago, a plane that flew out from Amsterdam was shot down over the Ukraine. A lot of innocent people died. And of course the question comes up, why? Then there are children that are hit, for instance, in traffic. You see that people think, why does this happen? People put flowers, people put candles to remember those who passed away. All these desires and these questions for why point to something non-material in us. Because anything material is measurable, so endless and boundless desires only make sense if they refer to an object which is non-material existence. So it has to be real to be there and resolve the paradox, but it cannot be material because it's unlimited. So now let's assume for a moment, for the sake of the argument, that the non-material does exist. Do we then resolve the paradox? So let's have a look at the four paradoxes. First, the paradox of loneliness. Would it be solved if we have non-material existence? Well, it would be if we could always be accompanied by a non-material person who is unlimited in his presence for us. Would the paradox of choice be resolved? Well, it could be if there would be an unlimited greatest good of unlimited perfection, which is also non-material and therefore not limited. The paradox of boredom, how could that be resolved? Well, if we could explore the greatest unlimited truth, which should also be non-material. And finally, the paradox of integrity. We can resolve that if there would be a love relationship with an infinitely lovable person, and therefore we reach full personal integrity. Now, of course, if we talk about a non-material person who always accompanies us, of the unlimited perfection, who is the greatest good, who is unlimited truth to explore, and who is an infinitely lovable person with whom you can have a love relationship, then what people would think of is that this is a description of God. This is what many people think of as God. So the question that then arises is, does God exist? Well, some time ago I heard a story of a primary school teacher who asked just this question to his class. He said, "Class, children, what do you think? Does God exist?" And one child raised his arm and said, "Teacher, sir, yes, God does exist, because I talk to him every day." And that's just the answer that I would like to give. I think God exists because I talk to him every day. Still, then we talk about a personal relationship. So the God of the paradoxes does not force anyone to enter into this relationship, because the relationship is free. Rather, he invites. So that also means that this argument is not a forcing argument. Everybody is free to deny it, and so it doesn't prove the existence of God in a necessary way. What it does do, though, is say that if he exists, the paradoxes do make sense. So we also make sense to ourselves. If he does not exist, we remain a riddle to ourselves. So finally, let's get back to this question where we started. Why is it so that the conflict between science and faith is so fierce? We can now understand a little bit more. If it is true that God is all about a very intimate relationship, then we can see that this relationship touches the heart of people. Now, anything that touches the heart is going to elicit strong responses. For instance, if you talk to an adolescent boy who maybe has a very difficult relationship with his parents, but if then someone comes up and says to this boy, "Well, something about his mother, attacks the mother of the boy, well, the boy is not going to have a very calm and well-reasoned response. The response is going to be strong and fierce, logically, because it touches his heart. Also, this debate between science and faith touches the heart of people. That is why it's so passionate. So, the only way to have a scientific debate about faith and science is if we can first accept the other person as a person, and then start talking about this academic discussion. So for a believer, like me, you would have to accept that other people do not have a relationship with God that I have. On the other hand, the believer will need to accept that I experience this relationship in the way I experience it, and it will have to accept that. Only then, if we accept each other at the personal level, can we think about faith and science in a rational way. So only when we accept another at the personal level can we have a constructive theoretical conversation about whether faith and science need to conflict necessarily. This is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your attention. Also, thank you very much to the people who I've been able to use the pictures of. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about my popular writings about faith and science, you can go to scienceandbeyond.blogspot.com. You can even sign up, then I send my occasional updates. They're not very frequent, but now and then you can get updates from what I've been writing. So thank you very much for your attention.